everybody, it's your friendly neighborhood madwoman here, and we are talking Stephen King. More importantly, Carrie, that novel. Because there's whispers of a limited run series coming to FX and about how they're going to cast the main character. So let's hop into that, shall we? Alright, this is an article that was from Collider, authored by Jeff Snyder. As you can see, FX and MGM Television are developing a limited series based on Stephen King's Carrie. At first, you would think it sounds pretty good, but apparently it's still in the development process without a script, and there's some sources saying that Carrie is going to be cast either as a person of color or a trans person. We'll get to that in my opinion section. Right now, let's get through the facts, shall we? Cool. FX declined to comment, which usually denotes that they're neither confirming nor denying that particular casting choice. And a representative for MGM TV did not immediately respond to a request for comment, which means they sent them something and probably haven't heard back yet. So you have one declined to comment and one really just hasn't responded, hasn't gotten back to them yet. Now, as a recap, Carrie first arrived to the big screen in '76. Well, it was directed by De Palma, and it stars Sissy Spacek as the titular character as Carrie. In '99, we had a sequel. For some reason, they decided to do a sequel. There was a made-for-TV movie, there was a 2013 reboot, and there was a little-known, short-lived musical that came out in 1988. Wow. I didn't know about the musical. I knew about the reboot. I knew about the sequel because I was wondering why there was a Carrie 2. We didn't really need a Carrie 2. I haven't seen the reboot of Carrie, but, I may go and watch it to see, what exactly happened. But as you can see, it has run the gambit. It has been on the big screen. It has been on the small screen as a TV movie. They've rebooted it. It's even had a musical. How do you turn a horror novel into a musical? Well, I guess if you can do it with Billy Joel's musical library, you can do it with a Stephen King book, right? I don't know. So over here, he's also got other projects, as seen in bold. Epic series based on 1975's Jerusalem Lot. It's HBO. In January is coming out with the Outsider adaptation. And there's also, for CBS All Access, a series based on his 1978 novel, The Stand. That one I might be interested in looking at. That one might actually get me to pay for CBS All Access. Maybe. Maybe. I read the novel. Watched the miniseries. So, maybe. Maybe. The second season of the anthology Castle Rock has wrapped on Hulu, and they're waiting for a third season. So he still has projects rolling, as well as Mr. King still writing novels. So, we'll see what happens there. I'll keep my ear to the ground. As far as adaptations are concerned, there have been some good adaptations of his novels to miniseries and big screens as well as small screens. There have been absolutely horrible adaptations, and there have been adaptations that people have liked that he didn't like. I'm mentioning The Shining because there was a big conflict there in between Stephen King and the director of the movie, because Stephen King didn't exactly like how the movie came out, but the movie was a smash hit. We're not talking about that. Carrie is ultimately a novel about an abused teenager that lived in a very Christian zealotous household, where her mother thought that unless you were, stringently Christian, you were inherently a sinner, and if you were born female, well, you had no redemptive qualities. That's the way her mother thought. So every time Carrie would misstep, she would get abused. Now, in a household like this, certain things weren't discussed, like getting your period, which is what happened to Carrie when she was in high school. And when she got her period, she didn't know what was going on, so she thought she was bleeding to death. Literally. She thought she was bleeding to death. She didn't know what was going on. Nobody had explained it to her. And this is what started the ridicule and the bullying in the school from the more popular people as well as, a few fringe people in the school. See where this is going? Now, this ultimately leads to the farce of her being named Queen of the Prom and having pig's blood dumped on her to where she literally snaps and kills everybody in the school as well as her mom, and she dies in the process. Now, how you can make a sequel from that, I have no clue, but they made a sequel from that. It's just a short synopsis. You can find other synopsis online. You can find his book to read it, but that's the general gist of what Carrie is. Now, in Dance Macabre, Stephen King himself actually admitted that there was a subtext of feminism under there. A woman of fight coming into her own, coming of age, finding her own autonomy, standing up for herself, and so forth. That kind of feminist message in the book, okay? So he does, in and of himself, explain that there is some undertones and some subtext of feminism in Carrie. That's fine. He's the author. He can say that. It was written in a time where you still had, where you had a feminism movement going on. So I don't have any problems with that. Do I have problems with them changing it from a white woman in Maine to a person of color or a trans person? A person of color? Controversially enough, not really. Let me explain. It wouldn't change the dynamic much because in every race and ethnic background, you do have very zealous people in regards to their religion. So, race swapping Carrie wouldn't be that big of a difference, really. Would it change the fact that that's not the way she's described in the novel? Yes, but again, this is an adaptation to a small screen for a limited series. I don't much have a problem with her being swapped for a black person now, or a person of color. Doesn't necessarily have to be a black person. The inherent problem is this, and a lot of people are going to argue this, and I can see where they're coming from with this. When you swap an original white character for a person of color, the problem inherent in that is, again, you're usurping a traditionally white role. You're eradicating it because you're putting in a token character. This part I understand. Okay. I don't want to be tokenized personally. I don't want my Latin American heritage to be tokenized by, any existing characters being replaced by a Latin American character. Okay. I don't want that. I want original stories, to come from an author, a writer, a comic book, person that is organically Latin American, not usurping an already existing hero or lore for that. In this instance, if you change her from white to black, it's going to be different from the novel, but you don't have to change the story very much at all, really. Just, slip a person of color in there, and it'll probably work the same, depending on how good an actor that person happens to be. The problem with putting a trans person in the role of Carrie is this. You're changing the narrative of the movie. And let me explain why. There are a lot of different dynamics, and the story is different as far as a trans person is concerned. Is this a transgender person that isn't making any transitions, that isn't on HRT, that isn't going on any hormone blockers in order to change from male to female or female to male? Because if it isn't, then you can say the mother is ridiculing the person or punishing the person for being mentally unstable, or, being possessed, as it were, because they think that they need to be something else without exacting a medical change or any kind of psychiatric diagnosis. There are a lot of, zealotous Christian cults out there that don't believe in going to doctors, and psychiatrists even less. If this is a transsexual person in the movie and they are going through a transition, this is a whole different dynamic as far as Christian values and Christian views are concerned. Because if the person is zealotous, again, we can have the mother accusing the daughter wanting to make a transition of female to male in this instance, I'm assuming. Again, being possessed of some sort of demon because, their body and their mind are in conjunction with one another. And the more the child tries to convince the mom that it isn't a possession, the more the mom is going over the deep end and the more it punishes the child, which is more along the lines of this. But then the dynamic changes when they're in school, because if you're updating the story for modern times, here lies a plot hole. In modern times, there is a movement in these schools already in existence to accept trans children, whether they be transgender or transsexual. Okay? There's already a movement. There's already a generation of children in these schools that accepts people that are transgender or transsexual. So how would you incorporate the bullying? How would you write the script and the screenplay in such a manner to make it painfully obvious to the audience and the school that this is a trans kid in the school setting? It's easy enough to show them in the home setting, butting heads with the parent. But how are they going to outwardly convey that they are trans to their schoolmates in order for them to get bullied? Because there are a lot of stories in the news where bullying is blamed on the fact that these children are trans and that, the bullies are transphobic, for lack of a better term, or a misunderstanding of the English language altogether. When you look deeper in these stories, it wasn't the fact that they were trans, it was the fact that they were flaunting it and putting it in other people's faces to the point where they were obnoxious to it. Now, I'm saying that's not all the bullying cases of trans kids, but those some of the cases. Some, not all, some. So, would the dynamic be changed if you changed it from a white girl to a girl of color? No. Would the dynamic, the general narrative, and the story have to change if you put a trans person in there? I believe it would. And instead of, the series having a disclaimer in there saying that this is adapted from the Stephen King novel Carrie, it would have to say inspired from. And then again, there's that little terminology that allows that loophole. Because if you say this is adapted from Stephen King's Carrie, people are going to expect certain points from the book to be in the series. And if they're not there, they're going to be upset because you're not following the author's vision in the novel. If you say it's inspired from, there's your loophole. You have all this other shit to play with, all this other stuff to add in there, and all this other stuff to do. And then when somebody goes, well, this isn't the book, this isn't how it was in the book. Well, we're not doing it like the book, but we were inspired by the book. See how that works? That's how you get around having to be accurate when you're adapting something from an author's written work. Is that you can say you were inspired by it and that you're not adapting it. And I'll be keeping an eye on this to see how this develops. Because as I said, earlier on in the video, and I'm going to say it here again, I wouldn't mind. I won't cry to the heavens foul if it is a cast as a person of color. But I would kind of almost be curious as to see how much the overall plot and story dynamic changes if it was a trans person, and if that trans person is transgender or transsexual. What do you guys think? let me know. And that wraps up another video. As always, all these little information over here, if you look over to your left, is all the different places you can find it. It's also down below in the description box, as well as all the sources that you saw on this video. If you're wondering what I use to record the video and highlight the passages, well, that's Evernote that you're seeing me use. I absolutely love that. No, this is not a paid sponsorship. I'm going to tell you that now. Evernote's my favorite. If you want to continue the conversation, well, that's what the comment section is for. You got your like, your dislike, your subscribe button, and that bell. You guys know